Bernstein, it's clear that immigrants provide so much value to our communities, to our economies, and to the success of our nation. No amount of lies or scapegoating can change that. Here we are in week 6 where hardworking TSA workers are not being paid, but it's just because Republicans refuse to rein in even 1 ounce of things that ICE is doing to terrorize these immigrants.
Welcome back to Freedom Forge, where truth is forged in fire and we don't shy away from the tough conversations. If you believe in freedom, strong leadership, and putting facts over political narratives, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe right now. Because today we're breaking down another Senate hearing that exposes just how deep the divide has become in America's economic and immigration debate. This hearing focuses on the U.S. economy, the growing national debt, and the role immigration plays in both. Lawmakers question economic experts about what a potential debt crisis could look like, while also debating whether immigration policies are helping or hurting the country's financial future. But as you're about to see, this quickly turns into something much bigger than just economics.
Before I begin, I'd like to give Mr. Boyle a chance to respond to the falsehood that was just said.
I thank Ms. Chu. And just to be clear, if there is anything that was false in what I said in my opening statement that Mr. Vogt wants to correct the record, we're still waiting 15 months later. He can have the courage to sit here and testify. But I did want to quickly just ask a question that hasn't come out so far in this hearing, though in your testimony, Mr. Bernstein, you referenced the Liz Truss moment. I'm reminded of the old joke when asked, "Sir, how did you go bankrupt?" He replied, "Well, slowly, and then all of a sudden." Do you want to just talk a little bit more about what exactly a debt crisis would look like, how we would know that it's upon us?
Yeah, it's an important question, one that I think is pretty unexplored here. I think that's an area where we need to do a lot more work. The Liz Truss moment is what happened when creditors who buy debt from the United Kingdom, UK debt, were deeply spooked by a seriously fiscally reckless budget proposed by the Truss administration, and there was a sudden stop to that credit flow, and of course interest rates shot through the roof, and that's a clear example of a debt crisis called a sudden stop. That's quite unlikely, as I also say in my testimony. I think that's quite unlikely to happen here. We have large fluid debt markets, we have the reserve currency. I worry actually more about a slow burn in this regard, and I have a figure in there showing the interest rate called the term premium, which is the risk that our creditors are asking for when they lend to us. It's still low in historical terms, but it's creeping up.
Thank you. I do want to
I
yield
would
back
like to
Ms.
reclaim my
Chu.
time.
Yeah.
Because I actually had a lot to ask, but yeah, I think the time has gone. So, Dr. Bernstein, I want to start with what I think is one of the most dangerous and persistent lies we've heard from Donald Trump and Republicans, that immigrants are somehow a drain on our economy and our federal budget. They're using this lie to justify despicable violence, authoritarianism, and complete disregard for the rule of law. In fact, I would say the scapegoating of immigrants is essential to Trump's power grab. But the facts tell a different story. Over the past 3 decades, immigrants, both documented and undocumented, have contributed trillions more in taxes than they've received in benefits. And in fact, economists have found that without their contributions, our national debt would be dramatically higher, potentially approaching double its current share of GDP. And in fact, in my district in LA County, undocumented immigrants alone generate over $250 billion in economic output and support more than 1 million jobs each year. So while immigrants contribute enormously to our economy, it's Donald Trump and Republicans' policies that are wreaking havoc on our economy. Their signature legislation, the Big Ugly Bill, skyrocketed the deficit by $4.7 trillion, and the nonpartisan CBO confirmed that Trump administration's executive actions on immigration alone will actually increase the deficit by $500 billion over the next decade. So, Dr. Bernstein, if we are serious about reducing the deficit, can you explain how creating a strong and growing workforce, including immigrants, is important, and what happens when policies move us in the opposite direction?
I think that's actually pretty easy to explain when you consider the fact that income taxes account for about 50% of our revenue to the Treasury, and payroll taxes add about another 35%. Well, what do immigrants do when they're in the workforce? They contribute income and especially payroll taxes. So the numbers that you cited, which are precisely accurate from the CBO, are simply underscoring the point that especially since immigrants tend to be younger than the age of the workforce, they tend to work and they contribute through both of those channels, income and payroll taxes.
Thank you. And Dr. Bernstein, it's clear that immigrants provide so much value to our communities, to our economies, and to the success of our nation. No amount of lies or scapegoating can change that. Here we are in week 6 where hardworking TSA workers are not being paid, but it's just because Republicans refuse to rein in even 1 ounce of things that ICE is doing to terrorize these immigrants. And also, I would like to say I was interested in what you said about reducing deficits is necessary and desirable, but it's easy to do so in a way that does far more harm than good. And I wish we had time for you to expand upon that, but I appreciate it.
Chair will allow another 60 seconds.
Oh, could you please?
I'm glad you asked me that because I actually would love to see this committee have a follow-up panel to this one, which explains how we get to where we want to get to. It's one thing to say we should get to 3%. We all agree with some version of that. But how we get there is critical. And as I argued, as I argued in my testimony, there are ways to do this that would do far more harm than good by cutting programs that economically vulnerable people depend on. And unfortunately, we've already seen some of that in the big budget bill, and I think it would be a really serious mistake to continue down that path.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentlewoman,
Right out of the gate, the conversation starts with a discussion about debt, something every American should be paying attention to. We hear about what's called a debt crisis and how it can happen either suddenly or slowly over time. One example brought up is what happened in the United Kingdom under Liz Truss, where reckless fiscal policy caused markets to panic and interest rates to spike almost overnight. Now that right, there is a warning sign, because what they're admitting is that when governments spend irresponsibly, eventually the people lending the money lose confidence. And when that happens, things can spiral fast. Even the expert admits that while a sudden crisis may be unlikely in the U.S., there's concern about a slow burn where borrowing costs gradually rise. And here's my take on that. A slow burn is even more dangerous because people don't react to it until it's too late. It creeps up quietly, and before you know it, the system is strained beyond repair. But then the hearing takes a sharp turn. Instead of staying focused on debt and fiscal responsibility, the conversation shifts into a political narrative about immigration. And this is where things really need to be challenged. We hear claims that it's a dangerous lie to say immigrants are a drain on the economy and that they actually contribute trillions in taxes and economic output. Now look, nobody is denying that people who work and pay taxes contribute to the economy. That's basic logic. But what's being ignored here is the full picture. Economics is not just about revenue. It's about costs, infrastructure, services, and long-term sustainability. You can't just talk about tax contributions without also talking about the strain on healthcare systems, education, housing, and public resources. That's not an opinion, that's reality. And what really stands out is how quickly this turns from an economic discussion into a political attack. Instead of debating policy, we hear broad accusations about lies, authoritarianism, and power grabs. That's not how you solve problems. That's how you distract from them. Because here's the truth. If we're serious about fixing the national debt, then everything has to be on the table. Spending, taxation, and yes, immigration policy too. You cannot have an honest conversation about the economy while selectively ignoring major factors that impact it. Then we get into the argument that immigrants are essential because they are younger and contribute through income and payroll taxes. Again, there's some truth there, but here's the missing piece. A system without clear limits, without enforcement, and without structure doesn't just grow, it becomes unsustainable. It creates pressure points that eventually affect wages, job markets, and public services. And yet, instead of addressing those concerns head-on, the focus shifts to blaming one side of the political aisle and labeling opposing views as misinformation. That should concern everyone, regardless of where you stand politically. Because when debate turns into dismissal, when disagreement is labeled as dishonesty instead of being addressed with facts, that's when real solutions become impossible. Another major point raised is deficit reduction. And this is where things get even more critical. There's acknowledgement that reducing the deficit is necessary, but also a warning that doing it the wrong way, like cutting programs for vulnerable populations, could cause harm. And that's a fair concern. But here's the question that wasn't fully answered. If not through spending cuts, then how? Because you cannot keep increasing spending indefinitely without consequences. That's not sustainable economics. That's wishful thinking. At some point, priorities have to be set. Tough decisions have to be made. And pretending that there's a painless solution only delays the inevitable. What this hearing really reveals is not just a policy disagreement, but a fundamental difference in how leaders view responsibility. One side focuses on growth and inclusion as the answer to economic challenges. The other emphasizes discipline, enforcement, and long-term stability. And the truth is, you need balance, but right now, balance is missing. Because a nation cannot thrive on promises alone. It needs structure, it needs accountability, and it needs leaders willing to confront hard truths instead of avoiding them. At the end of the day, this wasn't just a hearing about debt or immigration. It was a window into how decisions are being made at the highest levels, and whether those decisions are grounded in reality or driven by ideology. And here on Freedom Forge, we're going to keep asking the questions that matter. Can the U.S. sustain its current spending? Are policies being designed for long-term stability or short-term political gain? And are leaders truly addressing the root causes of economic challenges or just talking around them? Because those answers will shape the future. If you want more real, unfiltered breakdowns like this, where we cut through the noise and give you the full picture, make sure you like this video and subscribe to Freedom Forge. Because the truth doesn't defend itself. We have to stand up and speak it. And I'll see you in the next one.